Light and peace, brothers and sisters. Topic of discussion today is circumcision, the mark of circumcision. Today, the practice of circumcision still exists with male child. Religion people practice it, spiritual people practice it, normal people practice it, the hospitals, wherever you go, they practice this. But when you go back to ancient times, a lot of people don't even know that this thing came about just to preserve a particular host of race, a particular race of angels, okay, that had seed. In other words, they had children, and they were trying to preserve everlasting life in heaven. And majority of people don't even know how this thing came about. So I'm going to go to the OahspeCollegeUniversity, using the OahspeCollegeUniversity to decode this. But before that, the circumcision was to preserve, the circumcision was used so that the iron women would be able to identify that this iron man is circumcised, so I can have sex with that person, so I could bring forth a seed of light or seed of everlasting life. And what's so amazing is that when you look at the races of humans, the drugs could not produce a seed of everlasting life, right? And including even the Mongrains, the Eons, and the Assuans, which is considered the Adamites. But just one thing to understand here is that the race of angels, which would be equivalent to Eve in the Christian Bible, while the Assuans would be equivalent to Adam, they had sex. The race of angels had sex with the race of Assuans, which is the equivalent of Adam, and they gave birth to Ayan. And it was these Ayans that God or Lord was trying to make sure that they do not go back to have sex with the Assuans, the Druks, the Eons, and the Mongrains. You see that? But in order to do that, they had to put a mark so that you'll be able to identify. It's no different in our world here in United States, right? How do you know that I'm a New Yorker, right? And how do you know someone who lives in the state of Texas? How do you know that person lives in Texas? Or how do you know this person resides in Texas, right? The best way to do is by identification card. And you have to have a New York State card, New York State ID card, and that person have a Texas card. That's how you identify. So for example, when they ask you, where's your ID, once they see Texas, they'll be like, oh, this person resides in Texas. So no difference. So the mark of circumcision was placed upon the male childs of the Irons. Okay, so I'm going to go to the first book, First Lord, chapter 1, verse 18 to 20 to decode this using the OahspeCollegeUniversity. Verse 18. I'm reading from the first book, First Lords, chapter 1, verse 18 to 20. Verse 18. And woman, being more helpless than man, cried out with fear, saying, O Lord, how shall I bring forth to you, and not the sons of death? You see that? Sons of death will be darkness right now, right? So they were bringing forth children of darkness. And verse 19, the Lord said, because you have brought forth in pain, and yet called on my name, behold, I will be as a shield and protector to you. For I will also put a mark upon the Irons, my chosen. So you shall know them when they come to you. And the Lord commanded the males Iron, verse 20, old and young, to be circumcised, so that women would not be deceived by the drugs. And the Iron circumcised their male, old and young, for it was the testimony of the Lord to women that the seed of their seed was born to everlasting. You see that? So they needed to preserve the seed of everlasting life. Because think about it, right? These angels are doing double work in heaven, trying to get an harvest to Jehovah, to the Creator, And if they bring forth, think about it. So if they bring forth eons, droogs, yanks, mongrels, these races of humans, 98% of them probably don't even want nothing to do with everlasting life in heaven. They don't want nothing to do with second resurrection education. They don't even want to be a bride and bridegroom of the Creator. Okay, so they come back to our world. So, and they needed to find a way to preserve this. So if I go back to, so I'm going to go to the next book, the Lord's first book, chapter 1, verse 28. And I gave the circumcision as a measure of the boundary of my chosen. You see that? So yeah, there's a boundary saying, look, when these males come to you, I'm talking about the irons women now, right? When the males come to them, they will know just by the mark saying, oh, wait a minute, you're not circumcised, so definitely you're not an iron, right? And that's how they're able to identify me, and they'll be like, no, I ain't having sex with you. You see that? That was how this was being identified. And the Lord's second book, chapter 1, verse 18 to 20. The Lord's second book, chapter 1, verse 18 to 20. And now behold, the chosen were tempted by the people of darkness. And it came to pass that the new race was born on the earth. And they were called eons. You see that? So if you were to look at how eon came about, it was the iron had sex with droog. And then they gave birth to eons. Now, if you ask how did the droog come about, it was the Aswans that had sex with irons. They had sex with irons, and then they gave back to the droogs. Okay, and then the droogs had sex with the irons to give back to the eons. So I have a little graph, that gives me this identification, how to identify this and how they came about. And then it said, so I'm reading from, let me read verse 18 again. And now behold, the chosen were tempted by the people of darkness. And it came to pass that the new race was born on the earth. They were called eons, after the ancient warriors that destroyed the chosen before them. And verse 19, these eons were copper colored and were capable of speech. And when God saw that what happened, he called to the eons, saying, O you that could dispense with the Lord, did I not give you the mark of the chosen as a limit to the line of my chosen? You see that? So he's inquiring now. He's asking the race of irons, the race of humans called irons. Hey, look, I gave you the mark of sin. So why are you going back to steal? This is so interesting. Why are you going back to the droogs to have sex with them? Come on, what's going on here? And you still giving me back? You're giving back children of darkness to me now, because now my labor is going to be double. Because all those angels that gave birth to the irons have to labor for at least for 200 years or even more, because there'll be some times where the seeds, when they cross over to heaven, they probably don't want that. Obviously, they don't even want nothing to do with resurrection. They don't want to be a bride or bridegroom of the Creator. They don't want to go to Ethiopia, period. They want to come back to our world and have fun. You see? So, and then, the verse 20 says, when God saw what happened, he called to the iron, saying, O you who could disperse with the Lord, did I not give you the mark of the circumcision as a limit to the line of my boundary? And because if you remember, in the Lord's first book, chapter 1, verse 28, and verse 28 says, I gave the circumcision as a measure of the boundary of my chosen. So it was clear. So, but what's so funny is that the iron still went back, they still went back to the droogs and had sex and gave back to the humans. So I'm going to go to the next chapter, which is the book of Divinity, chapter 13, verse 16. The book of Divinity, chapter 13, verse 16. Verse 16, and 11 days after that, behold, Agi began to fall on heaven and earth. The belt of meteors gave up its stones, and showers of them rained down on the earth, and the sun became like a red ball of fire. It remained so for 116 years. And the peoples of Arabia is Africa, Vinju is India, and Japhet will be China, fell from holiness, and the Zarathustrians gave up celibacy by hundreds of thousands, and married and begot children in great number. Many women gave birth to 20 and some even to 25 children. Wow, this is deep.com. This is very deep. 25 children, and some men were the fathers of 70 children. Whoa. Wow. not a few, even of hundreds. And the Zarathustra, even the fetus, you see, this is deep. Even the fetus with the mark of circumcision went and married with the mongrels, and they with the drugs, so that the foundations of the caste were broken. So you see, mongrel and drugs are two different races of humans now. You see, because I had a chat. So the drugs had sex with the Gans, and Gans came about and gave birth to mongrels. And what this is saying is that the Ions went to drugs and had sex, and also went to the mongrels and had sex. Now this is deep. We're talking about these Ions, just, you know, they just kept on going left and right to different races to have sex with them, and they were refusing to preserve the seed. You know, they didn't want nothing to do with the everlasting seed no more. So I'm gonna go to, because, you know, another thing is that when you look at this, it's like, okay, what seed are we talking about here? So and I'm gonna go to the book of Akban, chapter 9, verse 40, which verse 40 says, by the laws of circumcision, the fetus could only marry among themselves in order to preserve a knowledge of Jehovah. You see, that's the seed we're talking about. The seed was to preserve the knowledge of Jehovah. And among mortals, those who were holy were preserved. Those who went after earthly things and after the idolaters were cut off. But even in this, Jehovah profited the seed of the fetus by raising up heirs of Suis among the Ethans. You see that? So with the laws of the circumcision, the fetus, which are the worshippers of the Creator, were able to preserve the knowledge of the Creator among mortals. And you see how it says, but even in this, Jehovah profited the seed of the fetus by raising up heirs of Suis. You see that? So at least they were able to raise something by, you know, creating these laws of circumcision. This is what the laws of circumcision, or shall I say the mark, you could call it the mark of circumcision, the laws of circumcision, whatever it is. This is what, you know. But when you look at today's world, when we argue that, do we really have the seeds of the Creator in us? Those are forefathers. Because when you really look at it, you know, because people practicing the circumcision, but, you know, it's doing nothing though. Because when you really look at people now, majority of people don't have the knowledge of the Creator. They just have the knowledge of God sitting in the heavenly throne. You know, they have a God sitting in the throne, believing that that's the Creator. So if a majority of people believe in that, that tells you they don't even have the seed of the Creator in them. You know, because the Creator does not sit on the throne. You know, angels can sit on the throne, humans sit on the throne, not the Creator. You know, if a Creator sits on the throne, then he's bound. The Creator is boundless. You see, that's the secret. Just decode it right there. Just using the OahspeCollegeUniversity, common sense. So I'm going to go to the next book, which is book of Akban, chapter 25, verse 7. The book of Akban, chapter 25, verse 7. For this reason, the mark of circumcision was given to your forefathers, lest the fetus women, you see that, be led astray by idolaters, and yet, despite all precautions, many fell, being tempted by the flesh. By the flesh, that's libido right there. You know, when your libido is very high, you know, you will have sex with anything. And their heirs descended lower and lower in darkness. That was what the God at that time, back in the days, you know, about 70,000 years, or, you know, between 60 to 79 years ago, 79,000 years ago, between 60,000 to 79,000 years ago, the God and the Lord in during those time was trying to prevent their descendants from darkness. Because you see how this verse says, for this reason the mark of circumcision was given to your forefathers, lest the fetus women be led astray by idolaters, and yet despite all precautions now. So the precautions is, you know, they were creating rules, they were creating laws, you know, that you have to circumcise the child of the fetus. And many fell by tempted by the flesh, and their heirs descended lower and lower in darkness until they lost sight of the other person and did not believe in them. You see that? So the mark of circumcision was to preserve certain group of people who were faithists, that they do not marry with different group. When you look at today's society, I can only think of a group of the Jewish community that I believe they still practice something like this. They do not intermarry. But when you look at the DNA, clearly the book of Aqaba, chapter 9, verse 40 clearly says it, that, in order to preserve the knowledge of the Jehovah among mortals. But when you look at it, even the Jewish people, they believe the Creator is sitting on the throne, on an heavenly throne. They believe the Creator is bound by a throne, bound in a kingdom, sitting in a heavenly kingdom in heaven somewhere. So that right there tells you they don't even have the seed in them. You see that? You see how easy we have to decode stuff? Brothers and sisters, light and peace. This is it. Circumcisions, the reason for circumcision, the mark of circumcision, you want to call it the mark, the laws of circumcision, however you want to put it. The OahspeC just clearly explains it. There were some other verses in the OahspeC I could have put up, but I just didn't want to go that route. But I believe this actually, what I just all these verses that I put there actually clears it up. It came about from a race of humans called Ions, and this Ions came about as a result of sex of group of angels that had sex with a group of Asuans, and they gave birth to so Asuans and angels gave birth to Ions, and Ions from there started, they went back to have sex with the Asuans, and they gave back to Druk. Interestingly enough, the Druk had sex with Ions, and they gave back to Eons, and then the Ions, yes, something interesting. The Ions had sex with the Gaians to give back to the Eons. And what's another interesting stuff is that the Drugs